All right, good afternoon, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. Okay. Well, hello. I'm Michael Scharf. I'm the co-dean of the law school, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you to this lecture sponsored by our Center for Business Law, which is under the leadership of Professor Juliet Kostritsky, and it's also co-sponsored by our newly expanded Institute of Compliance, Risk Management, and Financial Integrity, which is directed by Professor Eric Chafee. And Eric has just joined us this year, and he's been transformational. We're so lucky to have him. Now, our Business Law Center is one of the absolute jewels of our law school. It has earned Pre-Law Magazine's top A ranking 5 years in a row now. And Juliet and her colleagues have done amazing things, and this is just one more to top that off. Through the Center for Business Law and the efforts of Professor Chafee, the School of Law is proud to sponsor the Ohio Securities Conference with the Ohio Division of Securities. This is an annual event that is one of the leading securities regulation conferences in the nation. And we are particularly pleased, and I'm pleased to announce this publicly for the first time, that starting in October, this conference, which has been in Columbus in the past, is going to annually be held right here in this moot court room at our law school. Our distinguished speaker today is Andrea Seidt. She is the Ohio Securities Commissioner who heads the Ohio Department of Commerce's Division of Securities. The Division of Securities is composed of a group of outstanding blue sky regulators. We are lucky to have them overseeing the securities industry of our state. And Commissioner Seidt has been an exceptional leader of the division. Her lecture today is entitled Technology in the Securities Industry, Promoting Innovation Without Compromising Investor Protection. So without further ado, please provide a warm welcome to Commissioner Seidt.
Thank you, Dean Scharf. Get everything situated here real quick. It's too tricky. All right. Well, I've had the pleasure of working with Professor Chafee for, I think, more than a decade now, working on the Ohio Securities Conference. So if you've never gone because you didn't want to make the trek to Columbus, as Dean Scharf mentioned, we're excited to be moving it to Case next year in October. I think the date will be October 25th, so mark your calendars now. But for tonight, we're going to talk about a different topic. We're going to talk about technology in the securities industry. Let's see if I can operate this from here. I can. All right. So to set the table for this lecture, I'm going to spend the first half talking about robo-advisors, DIY platforms, and crypto. Exciting topics in and of themselves. And then we'll spend the second half talking about quantum computing and AI. I will admit up front, I am not a data scientist, I am not a computer scientist, but all of these topics impact all of us, including me as a securities regular for the state of Ohio. I think I have about 45 minutes of material. We're going to reserve some time for Q&A at the end, so if you can hold your questions until then, I'd appreciate it. I like to keep things interactive, so sometimes I'm going to call out questions to all of you in the audience and encourage you to raise your hand or call out answers as we go through that. But if you look at this chart, which is just a historical chart of just technology in general, you can see in the last 50 years, during my lifetime, just explosive growth, right? If you're like me, at one time you used old landlines, rotary phones. I'm sure some of you remember those. Now we do almost all of our communication, personal and professional, on our mobile devices, right? We compute with this. We've gone from big cars to fully electronic and even autopiloted transport systems. So back in 1975, a guy named Gordon Moore was building a computer chip company called Intel. Have any of you heard of that company? Pretty big for Ohio nowadays. Anyway, he noticed back in 1975 that the number of transistors on a circuit seemed to double at a regular interval. And based on this recurring doubling, he predicted that computing power in the world would also double, and he said every 2 years. And his observations turned to be true, and they called his observation Moore's Law, and it's held up pretty nicely for a long time. But other companies have moved in alongside Intel. You might recognize some of those big tech companies on the screen. And they have worked with Intel and across the globe to push our computing power even further. These companies have become so mainstream that we even have coined a pop culture reference for their innovative leaders. Does anyone know what that is? Chance to call out and participate. Tech bros. Maybe you've heard of that little pop culture reference. That's right. Tech bros. So some of the leading innovators in those tech companies, they've been called tech bros. We also have tech ladies. Does anyone in the audience know who this woman is or what she has helped create? No one? Her name is Mira Murati, and she's the chief tech officer for a company called OpenAI, who has created ChatGPT. Seems our tech ladies don't always get all the notoriety and limelight that some of the tech guys do. Now, OpenAI and ChatGPT is an interesting story in and of itself. We probably could spend a whole lecture on it, and we don't have time to do that, so I'll just hit some of the highlights. The company was founded back in 2015 by a group led by Sam Altman, Greg Bachman, and Elon Musk, another popular name, another tech bro. That team was focused on advancing artificial intelligence in a way that benefits humanity. That was their goal statement. And so software engineering is not cheap and it's not easy. And you can see in this chart that they were able to scrape up $3 billion early on to work on this concept. And they also got some seed capital from Microsoft. They were able to pretty quickly turn that $3 billion investment into a $12 billion valuation, which is not too shabby. Does anyone have any guesses as to what ChatGPT is worth today? People are going to Google it. I don't know exactly what it's worth today, but back in November it was valued at $86 billion. So this is big money and certainly something of interest to us in the investment industry. I'm sure it's probably worth more than that today. ChatGPT racked up 1.6 billion visits in December of 2023 in just 1 month. That's a lot. Any given week, it gets about 100 million users, 2 million of which are software developers that are working on the next big thing. So what does all of that mean for the securities industry? Well, BNY Mellon pushed out a report last year encouraging everyone on their team and everyone really in the financial services industry to get on the information highway post-haste. They reported that around 2/3 of broker-dealers are increasing their investments in the client's digital experience. Why do you think they're doing that? Because that's what their clients want, right? They talk about the new generation, and they say the new generation doesn't want to bother with in-person visits. You know, why trek across town if you can do all of your computing on your phone? They don't even want to talk to an advisor on the phone, is what we hear. They really just want to be able to access that service on their own time through their apps. And then when things push to them so they can click yes, and the firms who understand this are growing, according to BNY Mellon, and the firms who aren't are really hurting. They say weak adopters have seen their asset bases decline nearly 40%. Now, not everyone has an investment advisor or broker-dealer to help them with their finances. According to Deloitte, around half of consumers are sitting out there on that deserted island. They want financial help, but they don't know how to get it. And they're not really trusting a lot of the financial professionals that are out there. Deloitte estimates that this is an untapped $14 trillion market, which could grow to $20 trillion by the end of this decade. So what are these people doing? They're getting their advice on social media. Forbes did a survey last year and found that almost 80% of Gen Z consumers were getting their financial advice from social media. Reddit, YouTube, TikTok, do any of you use these apps? Raise your hand. A lot of people in the room are using these apps. Around half of these social media users reported making some money by following tips on social media. That also suggests that the other half did not. Now, some of you might scoff at Gen Z for turning into social media for investment advice, but it turns out that that's what institutional investors are doing as well. I mean, I was really surprised to find this, but according to a digital survey done last year that interviews all of the big global institutional investors across the world, over half of the institutional investors they surveyed were using Reddit to make decisions. Reddit's huge. It has over 33 million different threads taking place on the topic of personal finance. Now, it may not be that they think these Reddit people are smart, but given GameStop and some other things, they do have the power to move markets. And hedge funds and other institutional investors need to follow that traffic and follow those conversations to see how it might impact them. According to the survey, they do also follow these social newsletters, and I listed the top 5 there. Robinhood's Sherwood Snacks was the most popular newsletter, followed by institutional investors. They're also tuning into podcasts for advice. I'm just sharing this because I just find it interesting. Money Talks was the most popular, but here are the top 5 that Smart Money is listening to, in case you listen to podcasts and want to listen to something new. Now, it's not easy to save and invest entirely on your own. In the past decade, many small investors have turned to robo-advisors for help. Does anyone in the office or anyone in the audience use a robo-advisor? Raise your hand. Not seeing anybody. They've become increasingly popular in the last decade. They're pretty cheap for a small fee. You can get end-to-end, real-time personalized advice, portfolio that's customized to your investment goals and your risk profile. Platforms are simple to use. The top 10 I've listed up here have combined $350 billion in assets, and they are currently serving millions of customers. So a lot of people are using robo-advisors. They started out as automated portfolio managers, but now they do a lot of different things. Tax loss harvesting and cash management. So from the regulator's perspective, I'm going to spend a little time on this slide talking about, what do regulators care about when it comes to fintech platforms? And I'm going to start with robo-advisors. What are the areas where they might be getting into trouble or there might be some heightened scrutiny? The SEC has focused intently on robo-advisors since 2018. They made them a targeted exam focus that year. And they're doing exams, and they brought a number of enforcement actions coming out of those examinations. First, they brought 2 actions on the same day against Wealthfront and Hedgeable. Wealthfront is one of the first. It's a big robo-advisor, $11 billion in business at that time. And it was fined $250,000 for making inaccurate disclosures regarding its tax loss harvesting practices and improper client testimonials in the form of paid bloggers and retweets. So I think they were kind of the pioneers of the Kim Kardashian finfluencers, where you get someone famous, get them to do a blog or do a TikTok and say how great your platform is. It's highly impactful, but there are SEC rules at play when it comes to retail communications, and so they got sanctioned for their misconduct along those lines. Hedgeable was much smaller, only an $81 million operation, and they were fined $80,000 for making misleading marketing comparisons. They were being kind of cherry-picking their performance figures and cherry-picking some less favorable figures for their competitors, and so the SEC fined them $80,000. They didn't survive that. So when we think about investor protection and innovation, it's a careful balance that we always got to think about, right? So the larger company, Robo, had $11 billion. It could survive that scrutiny, it could survive that fine, but a smaller operation couldn't. And so regulators need to be mindful of some of the fallout of some of their scrutiny and their focus. The founders have moved on. I don't think that it was the end of their world. They're now operating a company, Ether-based crypto platform called Hydrogen Technology Corp. In 2022, the SEC settled charges with Schwab for its robo-platform called Intelligent Advisors. Key charge was that Schwab made improper cash allocations that were less profitable for their customers. Schwab argued that the cash allocations were decided by sophisticated algorithms, but the SEC found it was the company who made those algorithms and manipulated those algorithms to make it more money for the company. Schwab paid $52 million in disgorgement and a $135 million fine. That's big, big money, big mistake, big costs. And so they also had to line up an independent consultant to revamp their policies and procedures. Last year, the SEC took action against Betterment, which is really one of the first robo-advisors that were out there. Similar, Wealthfront was making improper disclosures regarding their tax loss harvesting practices. Betterment paid a $9 million fine, but with each case you see the SEC getting more sophisticated. They now have a lot of data scientists and computer scientists in their program called FinHub. And so I did a law review article with working with Eric several years ago when robo-advisors were relatively new. And at that time, I'd say a decade, the SEC did not have computer scientists and data scientists, and regulators didn't really have the ability to go in and assess an algorithm, right? We just didn't have that capacity. I still don't have that capacity at the Ohio Division of Securities, though this year we are hiring for the first time a fintech specialist to be on staff who will be a data scientist. So even in Ohio, at our level, we're going to start building that capacity out of necessity. But the SEC has that capacity, and so what you see is they're really getting in there. They're smart, they have data scientists, they can credibly assess algorithms, they can see if those algorithms are being used or manipulated for a company's interest. So thought I would share that with you. I did have, let's see, oops, I skipped too far ahead. This Morningstar survey from last year, I thought it was interesting. So robos have been around for 10 years. This Morningstar journalist did a study of 7 of the biggest robos, and she created 2 very different investor profiles, 2 hypothetical investors, very different ages, different goals, different time horizons. The only thing they shared was a medium risk tolerance. I wanted to see how that would work. She made a couple of observations. One is, I think she critiqued their due diligence or their KYC abilities because their risk assessments consisted of 6 fill-in-the-blank questions, and one of them was just one very long sentence that had 6 blanks. I'm not sure how sophisticated and how well you can know your customer with such limited information. And the other thing she found was that 4 of the 7 robo-advisors recommended the exact same portfolio for these very different profiles. Interesting. Is it real still, a lot of money, a lot of time, but maybe there's still a lot of cookie cutting going on, and different platforms charge different amounts, so consumers need to do their research to understand exactly what it is that they're getting. So not everyone is really comfortable handing the keys over to a robo-advisor. Some people like to pick out their own stocks, and so for those folks, we have what I call DIY platforms. Up there, Robinhood and E-Trade are 2 of the larger ones that are out there. I just am sharing this really for informational purposes to give you a sense of the different products and services that these platforms offer. As you can see on the chart, both of these platforms offer stocks, options, ETFs, and your traditional IRAs. But Robinhood offers crypto, which E-Trade does not. Robinhood also offers IRA matches, which E-Trade does not. But E-Trade, on the other hand, offers mutual funds, bonds, some specialized IRAs, minor accounts, and if you need it, you can get access to a live person at a real brick and mortar branch. So DIY platforms have also received some regulatory scrutiny. Robinhood probably the most. It has been on the receiving end of both federal and state regulatory enforcement actions. Massachusetts was the first state to take action against Robinhood. Some of you may recall in 2020 there were widespread outages at these platforms. And for almost a week, the investors on Robinhood couldn't trade, which resulted in significant losses. And at that time, Robinhood didn't have like customer call centers. So when this happened, you were calling the number and you couldn't get a hold of anyone. Very stressful situation. So they really didn't have the infrastructure like a traditional brokerage house would have to provide customer service when these things were happening. Another thing that happened that year, a very tragic story about a young college student in Nebraska who committed suicide. He was engaging in options and margin trading through the Robinhood platform. And at one time he looked at his phone and it said he was showing negative $700,000 in the red. And he tried to call and he couldn't get in. He tried to email, he didn't get responses. And he thought that his parents were going to be responsible for almost $1 million losses that he thought he had, and he took his life. So again, real life consequences on these platforms. So Massachusetts took action and charged Robinhood with breaching its fiduciary duty. It also critiqued Robinhood's use of gamification. So back then, if you did a trade, you get little confetti popping up like you might in some of these phone games that you play, and people like that. Oh, then I'll do a trade again, I'll do a trade again, more confetti. It was encouraging frequent trading behaviors. And so Robinhood struck back at Massachusetts and immediately challenged Mass was relying on a new rule called a fiduciary rule that was controversial, separate and apart from what was happening with Robinhood. But it was the first time they used the rule, and so Robinhood challenged it. And so while all of that litigation was going on, it took several years, 3 years for that to kind of work its way through the system. The SEC, FINRA, and other states also took a look at FINRA. And so FINRA was the first to really have a major settlement against this DIY platform. It ordered Robinhood to order $12.6 million in restitution. So those people who couldn't trade, they lost money, they were going to get their money back, or at least some of their money back. It ordered Robinhood to pay a $57 million fine, which is, I think, even to this day, a FINRA record. So that's a lot of money for FINRA. And Robinhood paid the states, minus Massachusetts, $10 million in fines, plus another $10 million to resolve a customer class action lawsuit. A lot of money, almost $100 million. Turning back to Massachusetts, the Supreme Judiciary Court, which is their highest court, upheld the state's new fiduciary law in August of last year, which meant this case against Robinhood could proceed. And it was pretty contentious litigation, playing out in the press and playing out in the courts. But once Mass got that order, Robinhood came to the table to settle. And so I think it was just last month that the case settled for an additional $7.5 million. And let me take a sip. In addition to, they have already been whacked, $100 million, they've been hit. I think that they have reformed a lot of their practices. But Mass was able to get some additional concessions. Robinhood has agreed to reform its gamification practices. They stopped using confetti after the kid took his life, but now they've agreed not to do any celebratory imagery tied to the frequency of trading. They're not going to push notifications that highlight specific lists for you. And they're not going to do any other features that mimic games of chance. So it's not going to look like a Keno kiosk when you're supposedly on the platform. Robinhood has also agreed to engage a cybersecurity consultant because Massachusetts discovered a major cyber breach that impacted over 100,000 of its residents. So again, fintech is exciting and innovative, but there are risks to real people, and regulators pay very close attention to those risks. I'm moving quickly, I know, but it's technology, there's so much to cover. We're going to move now to crypto. And, I'm not going to go into a lecture about blockchain or Bitcoin. I know you're very happy to hear that. I've been through a lot of those myself. Again, I'm not a data scientist, so I'm not going to even attempt to do that. But suffice it to say that crypto is very exciting, and it was a really, really big thing a few winters ago. And so we're in Cleveland. I suspect there are some, football fans, some LeBron fans, people who probably watched the Super Bowl yesterday and probably watched the one 2 years ago. If not for the game, like me, for the commercials. So 2 years ago, the commercials they called it Crypto Super Bowl or Crypto Bowl because most of the commercials were being sponsored by crypto companies. Featuring famous athletes like our beloved LeBron, other movie stars, and if you are a Seinfeld fan like I am, that wonderful fellow Larry David, right? So how did it go? It went very, very well for the platforms. They made a lot of money, and it's really hard to see this in the chart. This is from Chase, JP Morgan Chase. But those spikes in first crypto interactions correspond directly with the crypto bull of 2022. Chase identified over 600,000 of its 5 million checking accounts moving money from checking over into crypto, and from that point forward, starting to move it back and forth. So we see this momentum building based on this retail mass marketing. And so at its peak, after the crypto Super Bowl, the global crypto market was $3 trillion. It's real money. It's a real thing. Now there might be some integrity issues with some of the valuations that give you that number, of course. It's crypto, valuations can be tricky, but obviously a real market. So while it worked out great for the crypto platforms, it has been a mixed bag for the investors. Some people have made it really, really big with crypto. I remember going to conferences when Bitcoin first came out, and people were buying pizzas with Bitcoin, and I had people saying, should I do it, should I do it? And of course the regulators, no, naysayers, right, don't do it. But if you had done it back then, you would not be working right now, right? Some people have made a lot of money in digital currency. But as with any hot new thing, especially in an unregulated market, fraudsters love that. They're going to flock to it. It's not regulated. It's hot. Everybody wants to get in on it. And so we had a lot of fraudsters come into the market as well. And then even some of the players who were first perceived to be credible started to falter in what we come to know as crypto winter. I hope none of you lost major money in crypto winter. I'm not trying to bring back bad memories, but I am going to kind of go through that really quickly to show you how quickly things and technologies can impact and roil the markets. So in May of 22, a stable coin called Terra, it's supposed to be pegged to $1, supposed to keep its value at $1, fell below its fixed value, which triggered a sell-off. So that coin and its sister coin Luna, they lose $40 billion in value like that fast, gone. Scary, scary. In June, crypto lender Celsius tells its users it's freezing all account withdrawals. And this is where we got to see the interconnectedness of the big players in the crypto industry. It turned out a hedge fund called Three Arrows Capital had invested in Terra. When it lost its money, it then defaulted on its loan payments to other crypto lenders like Voyager. When Three Arrows defaulted, billions of dollars of loans went bad. It impacted other crypto lenders like Genesis and BlockFi. So by July, Celsius and Voyager filed for bankruptcy, and sounds like a huge mess, it kind of was, but we had some players saying they were to come to the rescue. So let's roll to November. And so there are people paying attention. CoinDesk is one of those outfits out there that kind of watches the market and pays attention and does research. And it revealed that a big chunk of Alameda Research's assets consisted of an overvalued token created by FTX, which created another run on the bank, this time for FTX. And FTX agreed to be taken over by its rival Binance, which was, at that time, the world's largest crypto exchange. But Binance walks away saying, I found issues. We were looking at FTX and we found some issues. So FTX ended up filing for bankruptcy, and that triggered BlockFi entering into bankruptcy. And so the entire global crypto market crashes. So I told you it was at 3 trillion at one time, a lot of money. It dropped to 74 billion. So 75% of its value gone very quickly. And it's not just the people in these companies, it's real people behind them that have their money. They watched the Super Bowl. They wanted to be courageous like Matt Damon, so they put a lot of money into these deals and they saw it disappear. So what happened to Binance? It wasn't quite, the white knight that people thought it was. It was also exposed for licensing violations and lax AML practices. The CEO turned himself in and agreed to pay over $4 billion to settle the federal charges. It's interesting, I don't know why this is. There's some speculation that his criminal charges carry a much shorter prison sentence than SBF. So he's looking at potentially months. SBF, if he's convicted or, and everything, it's going to be decades, maybe even a life sentence for that young man. But some people are theorizing that they're wanting to keep Binance afloat because it's a gold mine of criminal intelligence data, right? You can see what terrorist organizations and other people are doing on the platform if you keep it afloat. Don't know, it's just something that's out there possible. But for Treasury Secretary Yellen, she was pretty scolding. She said Binance allowed money to flow to terrorists, cyber criminals, and child abusers. Any institution, wherever located, that wants to reap the benefits of our U.S. markets must play by the rules. Make sure that keeping us safe from terrorists, foreign adversaries in crime, or face the consequences. So where are we today? Crypto has not fallen off the face of the earth as many people predicted. It's still there. It's still a market. I pulled this chart off of Coinbase's website, and it's a good depiction of kind of where the markets are today. The blue at the bottom is Bitcoin. It's dominant. It still controls half the market. The other half is controlled by Ether, which is orange, stable coins yellow, and then alternative coins, everything else in the light blue. I've seen different estimates. During a congressional hearing last year, someone said that 83 Americans are holding crypto. That's a lot of people. As many people that vote, right? I mean, that's a lot of people. But Coinbase says more conservatively that it's 52 million. Either way, it's 15 to 25% of our population have held crypto at some point in their lives. And the crypto market cap has rebounded. I think it's right now, last I saw, around $1.8 trillion. Not 3 trillion, but it's gone up, right? It's heading back up. And I also heard that FTX customers may actually be made whole because of the crypto rebound. So who is responsible for crypto? Who's the regulator is a big question. Is it a commodity or is it a security? Does it depend on how mature the coin is or how big the market cap is? These are kind of questions that are out there. So I'm going to do a quick poll. I'm going to list a token. I want you to raise your hand if you think it's a commodity or a security. Let's start with Bitcoin. Raise your hand if you think Bitcoin is a commodity. Most people are raising their hands. How many people think it's a security? Few. How about Ether? Raise your hand if you think it's a commodity. A lot bit fewer than Bitcoin. How many of you think Ether is a security? Raise your hand. Couple. How about Tether? You think it's a commodity? Raise your hand. Gets harder, right? Gets harder. I don't see anyone raising their hand. How about Dogecoin? Is Dogecoin a commodity or a security? Some people, yeah, so there's a division there, right? Well, the SEC believes that most initial coin offerings are securities. They use the thing called the Howey test. They did a report called the Dow Report back in 2019, so if you really are interested in this debate, you should check out this report. It's linked there. and it explains the investment contract analysis that the SEC follows to make that determination. Chair Gensler, the current chair of the SEC, has doubled down on this analysis and strongly believes that, again, most tokens are securities and should be regulated as such, and that the existing digital asset market participants just need to come into compliance. And his staff has stood behind that. They've taken many actions against unregistered issuers and exchanges based on that analysis. The SEC brought 46 enforcement actions last year alone, which is a record high. It's up 50% from 2022. They assessed monetary penalties of nearly $3 billion. It's a lot of money. The big crypto cases you might have heard of are Ripple and Coinbase. In the Ripple case, Judge Torres from the Southern District of New York ruled that Ripple was a security as sold to institutional investors, but not a security as blind bid ask trades for retail investors on an exchange. Go figure. That's the analysis there. Meanwhile, in Coinbase, the SEC charged the platform for operating as an unregistered exchange or broker-dealer because it was trading unregistered coins like Solana, Cardano, and Polygon, and for not registering its staking as a service, as a security. 10 states joined the SEC in that investigation. Ohio was not one of them. So, if the tussle between the CFTC and the SEC is not enough to perplex you, the crypto industry also has to navigate state banking and securities laws, and states are all over the board when it comes to their regulatory approach to crypto assets. Some states are very, what they call crypto friendly, others are very crypto skeptical, and then there's a lot of states in the middle saying, feds, please make a determination so we can follow it. But while we wait, crypto is wrecking a lot of people's lives, and it's maybe not legitimate crypto and digital currencies, but again, it's those fraudsters that are flocking to the markets. 10 years ago, I didn't have any crypto cases in my division. Last year, a third of my cases involved crypto or digital asset. And most of these are just outright frauds committed by bad actors overseas. So I have some stats up there. Ohio's not alone. If you compare 21 to 22, there's like 16 states had 50 crypto orders, $100 million in losses. In 2022, it doubled to 32 states with 100 orders and a lot more money. This is just a graphical depiction of state enforcement actions. Again, crypto cases weren't even there 10 years ago. Now they're approaching half of state enforcement actions. It's a lot of burden. It's real resources that could get committed to those cases. And a small crypto case would involve thousands of investors and millions of dollars. That's a big case for us at the state level. So it really is posing a lot of resource challenges. It's why we are hiring a fintech specialist. So I'm going to spend a little more time talking about Celsius. It was a company that I mentioned filed bankruptcy during crypto winter. And the reason I'm going to talk through this is because while I strongly believe regulation needs to protect investors, but it should not obviously thwart innovation, right? We don't want to kill emerging markets through regulation. We want companies to innovate. We want to get the benefits of those innovations in a way that protects investors. A lot of people get frustrated with the SEC and CFTC's inability to work out what they view as a turf battle, right? They want this all worked out, and a lot of them just don't want to be regulated at all, let's be honest. A lot of it is, we want none of the above. We don't want to be regulated by the SEC, CFTC, the Treasury. We don't want any regulation, just let us be. And here, we're going to talk about Celsius Network to understand why folks like Chair Gensler push back on that. And I also have up here a link to an article from CNBC's Crypto World that talks about the Celsius bankruptcy. And the journalist Mackenzie Segalos pulled real letters to the bankruptcy judge from real crypto Celsius investors. And here's what they said. So there was a woman named Florione. She's a single mother of 2 daughters, also takes care of her parents. When Celsius stopped withdrawals, she said, look, I'm being impacted financially and my mental health. I can't sleep, I can't focus on work, I'm struggling hard to make a living. Jean Savelle she called herself, I didn't call her that. She said, I'm a little retired old lady, I'm living on fixed income, and she wanted to supplement her Social Security wages so that she could combat inflation. And she thought she'd earn enough to help her weather a few years like a safety net, and she lost it all. Stephen Browver, young father, had only $1,000 left in his checking account after Celsius suspended withdrawals. So it just tells you some of the crypto bull had a real effect. People really moved a lot of money into that market. And when they couldn't get it out, it obviously imposed some real hardships. He said, look, this is an emergency. I can't keep a roof over my head and can't put food on the table. Sean Moran was a guy who lost his family farm in Ireland. His family alienated him. He would dial into those social media chats, ask me anything chats. And, at that time they were saying, listen, don't trust the banks. The banks, they're charging you too much. Enjoy the freedom of crypto. And he believed all of that. And then he lost his money, and his family obviously distanced themselves from him. Raphael, again, believed all the commercials, all the social media, all the advertising. Please judge. Don't subordinate our claims. Don't let these big creditors get paid before we get our money back. And then there's Katie Davis, who lost $138,000. That's not a lot of money to some people. It might not be a lot of money to some of the people in this room, but to Katie, it was horrifying. She said, this is a real letter to a real bankruptcy judge. If I do not get that money back, I will end my life, as the loss will impact my family and I significantly. I'll let you sit on that for a second. So, the Division of Securities, I've been there for 15 years, and we deal with people like Katie every day. People at the SEC and the enforcement section deal with people like Katie every day. We're the ones, it's not me, it's usually my staff, that meet with Katie and say, your money is gone. Maybe the first time they've heard that. We tell them, you're not going to get your money back. It's highly unlikely that you're going to get your money back. They cry, and my staff holds their hands and say, we'll do what we can, but you need to understand this is kind of where things are. So there really are real life consequences. So when the SEC and others, push back and say, listen, we have these rules for a reason, it's because they don't want to see more victims and more people like Katie lose a lot of money in these markets. Just make sure we have some kind of protections in place. So they are going to shift now. We haven't even resolved the regulatory conundrum of crypto, whether it's securities or commodities, but I'm going to move on, just like technology moves on. It doesn't stop. It doesn't wait for the regulators to get their act together. It just keeps happening. So we're going to talk about quantum computing and AI. Let's start with quantum computing. I'm, again, not a computer scientist, but as I understand it, we've shifted from bit technology, where inputs are 0 or 1. I did take computer science as a freshman at Ohio State a long time ago. I remember that, 0 or 1. To qubits, where the inputs can be both 0 and 1, like a coin spinning in the air, in the multiverse sense. So if you're a Marvel fan, you know what I'm talking about. So it sounds great. It can speed up computing power to the trillions. I guess there's between 100 and 200 quantum computers in the world. IBM has 60 of them or so. But they can do things trillions times faster than regular computers. And so in the right hands, great. In the wrong hands, terrible. If you're like me, you struggle to remember your million passwords you have for everything, right? You got to remember this one, that one, whatever. Quantum computers decrypt whatever sophisticated passwords in millions or trillions of a second, right? No problem. They can run all the variables out like that. So that's why White House and other folks are making this a regulatory priority. We're right now on that cusp of this big technological change. We're leaving the time, are ending the age of cloud computing and are now entering the age of artificial intelligence, and it's happening very fast. Some people predicted this a long time ago. If you're an 80s child like me, you may remember the fun movie, the Arnold movie called Terminator. And I'm seeing a lot of memes and other things saying that, yes, this is what's going to happen. The computers and the robots are going to take over the world and eliminate the human race. Before you laugh at them, where is AI? Well, how is it being used? How prevalent is it? Well, essentially everyone in the tech industry is using AI in their business lines. Guess which industry is next? Financial services industry is next. They are investing record amounts in artificial intelligence. It can be used a lot of positive ways. It can help them execute trades quicker, manage portfolios better, do tons of Monte Carlo simulations, assess and manage risk. Those uses are not hypothetical. Financial firms are using AI today to do those things. Based on what I've heard, I've done a couple of AI conferences this year. Firms are using it to aid their work. They are not yet, we're not aware yet, of any firm that is allowing these AI platforms to autonomously do these things. But we had some professors who, in the computer field, who said the technology exists to do that. So you could write a code for AI to create its own brokerage firm and to run itself, and the technology exists today for that to happen. Firms have not done that, it has not been ruled out yet. They are using it to help them do those things, but the technology is there. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, according to the White House, it holds both promise and peril, right? So responsible use is great. It makes, helps us deal with challenges, makes us more prosperous, productive, innovative. But irresponsible use can be terrible. It can create fraud, discrimination, disempower workers, stifle competition, and pose risks to national security. So the White House has made AI a national priority. I thought I would spend just a few minutes, again, I'm not a computer scientist, but I thought we're using some techie terms, we'll maybe just do a little bit of some techie education. So what is artificial intelligence? Make sure here. So one of the co-founders of artificial intelligence is this guy up there on the screen, McCarthy, and he said basically artificial intelligence is a computer doing things if done by humans, supposedly involves intelligence. A little snark, a little sarcasm from him, but essentially it's using data, algorithms, and human feedback and applications to perform tasks that resemble human cognitive function. It's a machine figuring out ways to mimic or imitate intelligent human behavior. So it can see like people, recognize speech, make decisions if it's fully autonomous, and do all kinds of cool things. Algorithm. I've said it a lot of times, but maybe let's just take a second to figure out what an algorithm is. It's a set of well-defined step-by-step instructions for a machine to solve a problem and generate an output using a set of input data. There's a little some equations over there. If you're like me and you don't like math, just ignore it. But essentially it is complex mathematical codes to continuously learn from new input data and deliver new or adjusted outputs. Machine learning is algorithms processing large amounts of data to learn from it, making predictions or identify patterns without being explicitly programmed to do it. Most of you probably have a mobile phone and at least text message, right? You probably do that. Most of you probably do that. If you have an iPhone or one of the other popular phones, there's AI all over it. When you just use a text messaging app, if that's all that you do, and you have an iPhone, you say, it's going to give you the most 3 common words that follow that, because iPhone processes millions, probably billions of text messages every day for millions of people, and it knows, and it's taught its machines to know, and our devices to know, what the 3 most common words are, right? So this is how they work. When people are asked and surveyed, how many of you think you're using AI? A third of the US says yes, I think we are. It's really 77% of us are using AI today and may not even appreciate it. There's different learning models. I'm not going to go into this here, but it's in the materials if you want to get into it. Again, it's just different ways that there's language learning models and other learning models in order for the computers to do specific things to help us out. And it all depends on data, and obviously AI requires a lot of data, and in the securities industry, that would include internal sources at the trading desk, customer accounts, a lot of external sources, public filings like on Edgar, social media, and a lot of information about you, its clients, right? It knows how much you spend, it knows how much debt you hold, it knows what you say and how you react to social media and other public websites. It looks at your browsing history and your communications. So our firms and others know a lot about us. I'm going to go back to ChatGPT for a minute just to show you how quickly these machines and computers learn. Back in 2018, the app was originally trained on 117 million parameters. These are inputs, things they learn to help them respond to a question and deliver an output. The next year it grew to 1.5 billion, then 175 billion, and then 1.7 trillion by the time it launched for public testing in 2021. It's learning very quickly. It's very smart. It's very intelligent. It's getting more intelligent and more sophisticated every day. It's so smart, in fact, that it can pass all the college admission tests. Can it pass the LSAT? Why, yes, it can. The ChatGPT-4 scored a 163 on the LSAT, which is above average, I understand. It's been a long time since I took it. It's under the top 10%, but it's above average, which is pretty good. You may ask, like I asked, why isn't it getting a perfect score if it's that smart? It has trillions of parameters and trained on. It's because you law school professors are so tricky in your exam questions. You put in a lot of irrelevant data to see if the student can hone in and identify issue spot the relevant data. Good law students, that top 10%, can differentiate between that, but ChatGPT can. It treats all of that information in the text question the same. The irrelevant bits, it's going to pull up data from the internet for, as well as the relevant bits. So it's kind of interesting. Another reason that ChatGPT doesn't get 100% is that there's a lot of junk on the internet. What's this be? Garbage in, garbage out, that's right. So ChatGPT leverages and has been trained on a lot of garbage, unfortunately, because there's a lot of inaccurate information on the internet. I'm sure some of you heard about the situation last year where 2 lawyers from New York used ChatGPT to write a brief, and it cited fake case citations. Oops. I wanted to know how that could happen, and I saw an article from this Australian university that says it's because of something known as lossiness, loss compression. So ChatGPT is a super large language learning model. It takes tons of data from the internet, and in order to process it, it compresses it, and then it can restore it, which means for law review or case citations, it'll say, I see this case mentioned several times, and this case and this judge mentioned several times, I'm going to combine them. They're plausible things that can happen, but they didn't actually happen together. So it can, in the academic fields, it'll come up with fake research papers by real people in the field, real researchers in the field, but it's going to combine them as co-authors when they never co-author things. So it's going to mismatch titles, authors, summations from the internet, and then put them together because it's not exactly sure how to differentiate. That's how I understood. It gave me a little comfort that someone is figuring all of that out. So lossiness is just one data problem. Developers can consciously or purposefully exclude relevant data. It has demographic biases. One of the things ChatGPT was criticized for was relying on websites like Reddit and Twitter. Critics argue those sites tend to promote dominant points of view and tend to skew young and male. According to Pew, 2/3 of Reddit users in the US are males, between the ages of 18 and 29. ChatGPT also relies on Wikipedia, and only 8 to 15% of Wikipedians, there is such a thing, are women. So there can be some biases based on, again, some of the biases in the nature that's being pulled down. Some of you might have heard of Facebook or Meta running an application to compete with ChatGPT called Galactica, and they only had it up for 3 days because it was publishing a lot of false and racist information, so they quickly shut that down. If you're in the industry and you're going to use it, you need to be able to explain it. And as these AI models are growing in sophistication, there's something coming up called black box models. And these models are so sophisticated and have so much information in them that the humans at the firm and the human developers can't really explain why it is producing the outputs that it's producing. It can tell you it's performing very well, it's beating the S&P, it's doing great things consistently. But if I asked you how it's doing that, the people can't explain how. It's kind of gotten outside of their realm. Regulators are not going to accept that. I don't think, not for a while. There's always going to be fear of abuse and exploitation. So at least at this stage, I think if you're in the financial services industry and you're using AI and you get an examination from a regulator, you need to understand your models. You need to be able to explain it. There's always a human involved. It's never just Terminator by himself. There was somebody who programmed the model. There's somebody who reviews it and updates it. There's someone who's going to test it and retrain it. Someone going to verify the results. And then again, if a regulator comes knocking, there's going to be some human that needs to explain it. In this chart, I explain a lot of the different ways that AI is used in the securities industry, a lot of great things that it's doing. It is creating new products, increasing revenues, cutting costs, and improving customer services. Those are good things. We want to encourage those benefits. And I'm excited to see what it ends up doing in my lifetime. It's definitely making things faster, cheaper, and better, which is all very good. But regulators do have concerns. There are abuses, and they're always going to be monitoring them. So I encourage you to, as always, to check out FINRA and SEC guidance. I'm going to start with this FINRA report from 2020. I think it's a good checklist. They started out with, firms, if you're going to use it, make sure you're keeping mind of your KYC, your customer obligations. You need to authenticate your customers. Make sure the algorithms are considering the investor's full profile so they're matching properly. You need to think about AML. You don't want to be accused of laundering money for terrorist organizations like Binance was. You need to screen data for noise and bias. As we've discussed, inaccurate, poor quality inputs and correlations lead to adverse results. You need to protect your customer data. You need to have strong cybersecurity practices. I mean, with quantum computing, it's going to be an arms race. You're going to have the Norton or McAfee version of whatever the hackers had. You just got to stay on top of it. It's a never-ending battle. Firms need to test their models. They need to avoid herd behavior inclusion. And if the AI app fails, which is what happened with Robinhood during the outages, you need to have a solid fallback plan. SEC has a new rule proposal that's out in a fact sheet on conflicts of interest in the use of PDA. That's not public displays of affection. It is predictive data analytics. SEC is very concerned about firms using AI to maximize their profits at the expense of their clients. If we remember back that Schwab situation, Schwab said, "It's not us, it was our algorithm. It's the one that determined those cash allocations were optimal, but it made them more money." So they needed to understand their algorithm a little bit better to see what some of those unintended consequences were. SEC is very interested in anything that could be a harmful, costly conflict. SEC's Investment Advisory Committee also suggested the SEC create an ethical AI framework. They're very focused on the concerns about bias and discrimination. So if you're interested in that area, I encourage you to take a look at the IAC's recommendation from April of last year. And then states are still looking. Secretary Galvin is always on the cutting edge of state securities enforcement. He announced that they've launched a probe into AI last year where they're going to look at supervisory procedures and marketing. Those are the two things that Massachusetts is very interested in because a lot of firms, like I said, this is not theoretical. It's not science fiction. Firms are using AI today. If you are a member or a client of that firm, do you know that? Should you know that? Did you consent to your information being used the way that it is being used to deliver advice to you? These are the kinds of things that regulators will be looking at. How do you compare algorithms? How do you know which one performs better? Again, it requires a technological solution. So one of the ways that firms are doing it is they're engaging in transaction cost analysis. So they'll see how this robo-advisor performed based on this historical period of time with another robo-advisor. Growing area of the industry, some of the large firms have their own programs and there are independent outfits as well. This is my last slide. I'm sorry I went through this pretty quickly, but what are the key areas of concern to kind of conclude? Data privacy and cybersecurity. Don't want breaches, don't want people's information mishandled. We want to make sure that those consumer disclosures and consents are on file. Model risk. We don't want junk in, junk out. We want to make sure there's good quality data being used. We want to make sure that risks are properly managed and that the firms, if they're going in this area, understand what they're getting into, understand the models, and be able to explain them. Governance is always important. You need to have an executive or a team in charge of these technologies to make sure you're complying with all of these things and avoiding all of the pitfalls and all of the companies that I mentioned. I mean, we talked about tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars of fines. These companies are doing great things, but they're paying a lot of money, learning some expensive lessons. So having proper governance will help them avoid being the next one on the SEC's hit list. And then consumer protection. At the end of the day, we want people to make money in our markets. We want them to trust the markets. A lot of people withdrew from the crypto markets after crypto winter, and some of them will never go back. They don't trust that those are properly managed and regulated because they were defrauded and they lost a lot of money. So it's our job as regulators to make sure that the markets are safe so that they can grow and that we can enjoy all the innovation and benefits that we discussed tonight. That's all I have, but I certainly have time for questions.
Commissioner Seidt, I think what we're going to do, there's a reception upstairs. She definitely wants to engage with people, and she'll be happy to answer questions up there. It's up in Ben's place. We're going to transition up there because I'm not sure how soon this room is actually needed. But thanks for what's...
Sure. I'll see you upstairs, and I take any and all questions. Thank you.